August 17, 1946. Marine Corps Signal Battalion Archives, Quantico, Virginia. Major Howard Connor's hand freezes over the playback controls of the wire recorder. This doesn't match the code book. The structure is wrong. The authentication sequence, it's not there. Connor rewinds the magnetic wire, listening again to the Navajo transmission recorded during the assault on Iwo Jima's Suribachi sector, February 23, 1945. The voice is clear, urgent, speaking rapid Navajo. Connor cross-references his copy of the official Navajo Code vocabulary, 411 words, standardized at Camp Elliott in 1942, classified secret. The words are Navajo, but the patterns are completely different. He pulls another recording, Saipan, June 18, 1944. Different code talkers, same anomaly. The formal authentication protocols mandated in Signal Operations Manual 3A are absent. The message structure is compressed, streamlined, nothing like the careful transmissions from training exercises. He checks Peleliu recordings, Okinawa, Tinian. Every combat recording from mid-1944 forward shows the same pattern. The Navajo Code Talkers had been using a different code, not the official 411-word vocabulary they'd been trained on. Something else, something faster, something that existed nowhere in Marine Corps records. Connor's discovery would remain classified for 22 years. When declassified in 1968, it would reveal one of the war's most extraordinary stories. Indigenous warriors who independently modified their own communication system to save American lives, violating military protocol in the process, and never telling anyone until the war was over. The Japanese spent years trying to break a code that wasn't actually being used in combat, and Marine Corps commanders directed operations using a system they didn't know existed. The journey to this revelation had begun on May 4, 1942, when the first 29 Navajo recruits reported to Camp Elliott, California, to create an unbreakable code based on their native language. The project was the brainchild of Philip Johnston, a white missionary son who'd grown up on the Navajo reservation and spoke the language fluently. His pitch to Lieutenant Colonel James E. Jones was simple. Navajo was a complex, unwritten language with no alphabet, understood by fewer than 30 non-Navajos worldwide. No Japanese cryptographer could break what they couldn't comprehend. The original 29 code talkers spent 3 months developing the official code. 211 vocabulary terms for military concepts. Fighter plane became hummingbird. Submarine became iron fish. America became our mother, plus an alphabet where Navajo words represented English letters. By August 1942, the code contained 411 standardized terms. Each transmission followed strict protocol: authenticate sender identity, transmit message using exact codebook terms, confirm receipt, verify authentication. Average transmission time for a tactical message, 42 seconds. The code's combat debut came on August 7, 1942, during the Guadalcanal invasion. 6 Navajo Code Talkers, Privates First Class John Benally, Johnny Manuelito, David Jordan, Rex Kantz, Jack Morgan, and Charlie Sosi, transmitted orders coordinating the 1st and 5th Marine Regiments landing at Red Beach. Major General Alexander Vandegrift later stated, "Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima." But Vandegrift was referring to the official code, the one documented in training manuals. At Guadalcanal, the code worked flawlessly. Japanese intercepted the transmissions but couldn't decipher them. Compared to standard military code that took hours to encrypt and decrypt, Navajo Code Talkers transmitted in seconds. One message that would have taken cipher machines 4 hours to process went through Navajo channels in 20 seconds. The official code was 42 seconds average, but that was still revolutionary compared to Sigaba encryption machines. By December 1942, the Marine Corps authorized expansion. Recruitment increased. Training courses at Camp Elliott and Camp Pendleton processed volunteers. Henry Bake, Jr. from Lukachikai, Arizona, enlisted March 1943. Joe Kiyumiya from Cañoncito, New Mexico, enlisted May 1943. Thomas Begay from Shiprock, enlisted June 1943. By war's end, 420 Navajo Marines served as code talkers across the Pacific Theater. They transmitted at Bougainville in November 1943. They coordinated the invasion of Tarawa, where 1,009 Marines died in 76 hours of fighting. They supported operations at Kwajalein in February 1944, relaying coordinates for naval bombardment that fired 36,000 shells in 2 days. At each engagement, the official code performed exactly as designed. Japanese cryptographers intercepted transmissions, recorded them, analyzed them, and got nowhere. In Tokyo, Colonel Sadamu Shimomura's cryptographic section at the Imperial Army Intelligence Bureau dedicated resources to breaking the code. They captured a Navajo soldier, Private First Class Joe Kiyomiya, at Bataan in April 1942, before the Code Talker program began, and interrogated him about his language. Kiyomiya knew conversational Navajo, but nothing about the military code that didn't yet exist. The Japanese played intercepted Code Talker recordings for him. He couldn't understand them. The code terms bore no resemblance to everyday Navajo conversation. The interrogators concluded Kiyomiya was lying and tortured him. He survived the war. His testimony would later prove crucial to understanding what happened next. The Japanese obtained a Navajo language dictionary compiled by missionaries in the 1930s. Useless. They recruited Japanese soldiers who'd lived in the American Southwest before the war. None had encountered Navajo speakers. They analyzed phonetics, frequency patterns, message lengths. Nothing yielded results. American intelligence, monitoring Japanese radio traffic, noted increased references to Arizona language and unreadable native transmissions in intercepted Japanese communications. But the Japanese advantage, or rather the American advantage, depended entirely on transmission speed maintaining operational tempo. And as fighting intensified in 1944, as battles compressed into smaller time frames with more units coordinating in tighter spaces, 42 seconds per message began creating bottlenecks. June 15, 1944. Mount Tapachau, Saipan, Mariana Islands. The assault on Saipan's Central Highlands entered its second day. Corporal Henry Bake, Jr. and Private First Class Joe Kiyumiya crouched in a shell crater 300 yards from a Japanese machine gun nest that had pinned down 3rd Battalion, 24th Marines. Bake held the field radio handset. Behind them, American artillery waited for coordinates. Ahead, Marines were dying. The official code required specific protocol. Authenticate identity using the day's recognition sequence, 4 Navajo phrases. Transmit grid coordinates using the phonetic alphabet, each letter represented by a Navajo word. Specify target type using codebook terminology. Confirm ammunition type. Verify friendly positions. Request authentication confirmation. Wait for acknowledgement. Estimated time, 47 seconds if both operators performed perfectly. Japanese mortar crews had been tracking Code Talker radio positions all morning. Standard procedure: transmit, then move immediately. Bake calculated. 40 seconds to transmit, maybe 15 seconds to break down the radio and relocate. Japanese mortar time of flight from observed positions, approximately 70 seconds. The mathematics allowed no margin for error. Bake made a decision that violated every protocol he'd been taught at Camp Pendleton. He transmitted in pure battlefield Navajo, abandoning the codebook entirely. No authentication sequence, no phonetic alphabet, no formal terminology. He spoke the way Navajo speakers actually communicate in crisis, contextual, compressed, assuming shared understanding. Grid coordinates became directional references relative to known landmarks. Northeast of the Twin Peaks, 300 paces, in the tree line. Target type became functional description in idiomatic Navajo that translated roughly to the thing that keeps spitting death. Ammunition became big fists, not little fingers. Transmission time, 23 seconds. The receiving code talker, Sergeant Thomas Begay at battalion headquarters, understood instantly. Begay had grown up 50 miles from Bake in Arizona. They spoke the same regional Navajo dialect. The contextual references made perfect sense. Begay translated to the artillery officer, "Machine gun nest, coordinates mark 358772, request high explosive." The artillery fired 30 seconds later. The machine gun nest ceased firing permanently. Kiyomiya looked at Bake. Bake looked back. They'd just violated standing orders. They'd also saved perhaps 40 Marines' lives by eliminating that position before the advance continued. They did it again 4 hours later, then again the next day. Other code talker teams heard the faster transmissions on shared frequencies, recognized what Bake and Kiyomiya were doing, and began doing the same. Corporal John Goodluck at 2nd Battalion adopted it immediately. Private First Class Albert Smith at 1st Battalion started using compressed battlefield Navajo by June 17th. By June 20, when Saipan's organized resistance collapsed, virtually every code talker on the island had independently transitioned to the faster method. Nobody reported it up the chain of command. Major Howard Connor, signal officer for the 5th Amphibious Corps, noticed his code talkers were transmitting faster than training standards, but attributed it to combat efficiency. He had no way of knowing they'd abandoned the official code entirely. Marine aviators started calling code talker positions express mail, because requests for air support got through and responded to faster than any other communication method. What they didn't know was that the Navajo code they praised wasn't the code the Marine Corps thought it was using. The official Navajo Code had been designed in April-July 1942 under specific requirements issued by Marine Corps Signal Battalion Headquarters. The requirements were explicit. Create an unbreakable voice code that could transmit tactical intelligence without mechanical encryption devices. That required no code books in the field, everything memorized. That could be taught to Navajo-speaking recruits in 12 weeks, and that maintained message integrity through authentication protocols preventing enemy deception. The original 29 code talkers, Chester Nez, Peter McDonald, Samuel Billison among them, spent 12-hour days developing vocabulary. Military terminology had no Navajo equivalents, so they invented them. Tanks became turtles. Bombs became eggs. Battleships became whales. Each term was carefully chosen, memorable, distinctive, impossible for non-speakers to guess. They created an alphabet where Navajo words represented English letters. A equals Wallachi, ant. B equals shush, bear. C equals Maasi, cat. For security, they created 3 Navajo words for common letters, like E, which became Dzech, elk, Aja, ear, or Ana, eye. The code was brilliant. It was also, by necessity, formal. Authentication protocols existed because radio deception was standard Japanese tactical doctrine. The phonetic alphabet existed because geographic names had to be spelled precisely.
Saipan, spelled wrong, meant artillery hitting the wrong grid square. The standardized vocabulary existed because code talkers from different regions spoke different Navajo dialects. The codebook created common ground. But the mathematics were brutally simple. To transmit a fire mission under official protocol required 4-phrase authentication, 8 seconds, phonetic spelling of target location, 12 seconds, codebook designation of target type, 6 seconds, ammunition specification, 4 seconds, friendly position verification, 8 seconds, and confirmation sequence, 4 seconds. Total, 42 seconds average, assuming no static, no repeats, perfect conditions. In training exercises at Camp Pendleton, 42 seconds seemed acceptable. In combat on Saipan, where Japanese artillery targeted radio operators specifically, where tactical situations changed moment by moment, where American lives hung on split-second decisions, 42 seconds was an eternity. The designers of the official code had faced an impossible choice: security versus speed. They chose security. They built in redundancy, authentication, verification. These features made the code unbreakable. They also made it slower than battlefield reality sometimes allowed. Corporal Henry Back Jr. and his fellow code talkers in June 1944 made a different choice. They chose speed. But they didn't abandon security. They reimagined it. Their battlefield code relied on shared cultural context, regional dialect familiarity, and the assumption that code talkers on both ends of a transmission shared enough common experience to communicate in rapid, contextual Navajo that preserved operational security precisely because it existed nowhere in writing. The Japanese were analyzing a code book. The code talkers were speaking in cultural context. These were fundamentally different systems, and the latter proved faster precisely because it didn't require translation steps.
July 21, 1944, Tinian Island. Code talkers coordinated the landing of 15,000 Marines on White Beach using the streamlined battlefield code. Transmission volumes increased as the invasion accelerated. At one point, 6 code talker teams simultaneously coordinated artillery, air support, medical evacuation, ammunition resupply, and naval gunfire. Average transmission time, 25 seconds per message. Using official protocol would have required nearly twice as long, creating dangerous delays. September 15, 1944. Peleliu. The bloodiest assault in Marine Corps history to that point. 1,336 Marines killed in 1 month fighting for an island measuring 6 square miles. Code talkers transmitted continuously for 72 hours straight during the initial assault. Private First Class William Dean later testified, "We didn't have time for the full authentication. Men were dying while we talked. We cut it down to what mattered. Where the enemy was, where our men were, what we needed. The rest was wasted time." By October 1944, the battlefield code had evolved its own internal consistency. The streamlined vocabulary had compressed from 411 official terms to approximately 200 combat essential phrases. Code talkers eliminated rarely used terms, consolidated similar concepts, and developed rapid-fire conventions for common requests. Bring big fists meant high-explosive artillery. Send the birds with eggs meant bomber support. The turtle needs medicine meant tank requesting ammunition resupply. Authentication protocols hadn't been eliminated. They'd been transformed. Instead of formal 4-phrase sequences, code talkers used recognition through dialect and personal knowledge. When Corporal John Goodluck received a transmission claiming to be from Private First Class Wilson Price, Goodluck could verify authenticity by recognizing Price's specific regional accent and word choices. Japanese deception required more than Navajo speakers. It required Navajo speakers who could replicate specific regional dialects and personal speech patterns. The cultural authentication was actually more secure than the formal protocol because it couldn't be learned from captured documents. February 19, 1945. Iwo Jima. Code Talkers coordinated the most complex amphibious assault in Pacific War history. 70,000 Marines landing on 8 square miles of volcanic rock defended by 21,000 Japanese troops in underground fortifications. During the first 48 hours, Code Talkers transmitted more than 800 messages. Major Howard Connor, 5th Amphibious Corps Signal Officer, later stated, "Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima." Connor made this statement not knowing that the Navajos had independently modified the very code he thought they were using. At Mount Suribachi, when the famous flag was raised on February 23rd, Sergeant Thomas Begay transmitted the message, "The flag is up, the mountain is ours." The transmission took 7 seconds. Official protocol would have required 23 seconds. Hardly matters for a symbolic flag raising, but earlier that morning, Begay had transmitted 37 fire missions using the battlefield code, coordinating artillery that suppressed Japanese positions long enough for the assault on the summit to succeed. April 1, 1945. Okinawa. The final island invasion. Code Talkers supported operations for 82 days as Marines fought through defensive lines anchored on fortified positions like the Shuri Line, where 110,000 Japanese troops defended every yard. Transmission volumes reached wartime highs. Individual Code Talker teams sometimes sent 200 messages in 24-hour periods. Without the faster battlefield code, transmission queues would have created dangerous delays in a battle environment where timing meant survival. The irony was total. Japanese cryptographers in Colonel Shimomura's section continued analyzing the official Navajo code throughout 1945, attempting to break a system that wasn't being used. Captured documents from Japanese intelligence archives recovered after the war show analysis of the 411-word vocabulary, attempts to create frequency charts, and efforts to recruit Japanese Americans who might have encountered Navajo speakers before the war. Every analytical effort focused on the code book. None examined the possibility that Code Talkers were speaking contextual battlefield Navajo that had nothing to do with formal protocols. The Japanese were trying to break the wrong code. They spent years analyzing training materials while the real code lived exclusively in the minds of 420 Navajo warriors who'd collectively decided that Marine lives mattered more than signal protocols. By August 15, 1945, when Japan surrendered, 420 Navajo Marines had served as Code Talkers across the Pacific Theater. They'd participated in every major Marine engagement from Guadalcanal to Okinawa. They'd transmitted tens of thousands of messages. Not a single Code Talker message was ever deciphered by Japanese intelligence. Not the official code, not the battlefield adaptation. Casualty figures for Code Talkers remained remarkably low. 13 Code Talkers died in combat. 8 killed by enemy action, 5 in accidents. 33 were wounded. These casualty rates, roughly 3% killed, 8% wounded, compared favorably to overall Marine Corps casualty rates in the Pacific, where some divisions suffered 50% casualties during individual battles. The battlefield code's efficiency measurably improved operational tempo. Post-war analysis of combat recordings showed average transmission times dropped from 42 seconds, official code, to 25 seconds, battlefield adaptation, a 40% reduction. In high-intensity combat, this translated to hundreds of saved seconds per hour, allowing faster tactical responses to changing battlefield conditions. Comparative analysis reveals the strategic advantage.
American communication security relied on mechanical encryption, SIGABA machines, for high-level strategic messages, and code talkers for tactical field communications. Japanese forces used similar mechanical encryption systems but lacked any equivalent to the Navajo Code for tactical voice communications. This meant American units could coordinate faster at the tactical level, the level where battles were actually won or lost. The efficiency question raises profound implications. If the official code was supposed to take 42 seconds but actually took 25 seconds in combat, was the official code's security architecture overcomplicated? Or did battlefield necessity simply force adaptation that military planners couldn't anticipate in stateside training environments? Chester Nez, one of the original 29 code talkers, testified in post-war debriefings. "We did what we had to do. The code they taught us was good for training. But in combat, when your brothers are dying, you don't have time for all the extra words. We found a way to say what needed to be said, fast enough to matter, secure enough that the Japanese never understood. Nobody told us to change it, we just did." Peter MacDonald, who served at Saipan, Tinian, and Iwo Jima, later stated, "The code was ours. It came from our language. When we needed it to work faster, we made it work faster. We knew what we could cut without losing security. We knew our language better than any Marine Corps manual could tell us." Samuel Billison, reflecting decades later, said simply, "We never broke the code. We improved it."
August 17, 1946. Marine Corps Signal Battalion Archives, Quantico, Virginia. Major Howard Connor sits at his desk, surrounded by wire recordings and reports. The examination of combat recordings had revealed the truth. The Navajo Code Talkers had independently developed and implemented a battlefield adaptation that violated official communications protocols but improved operational effectiveness and maintained perfect security. Connor faces an impossible decision. Technically, every code talker who used the battlefield code had violated standing orders. Practically, they'd contributed significantly to American victory in the Pacific. Connor writes his report carefully. He documents the discovery, analyzes the implications, notes that the unauthorized adaptation apparently enhanced rather than compromised security, and concludes that no disciplinary action is warranted because the modification occurred in combat conditions, where battlefield commanders have discretionary authority to adapt procedures as tactical necessity requires. His recommendation: classify the entire matter secret, commend the code talkers for their service, and develop new communications doctrine that formally allows for battlefield adaptation of code protocols when tactical conditions warrant. The report is filed, classified, and forgotten for 22 years. When declassified in 1968, it reveals a story more interesting than the official narrative. Indigenous warriors who didn't just use their language to win a war. They independently improved their own system when military bureaucracy had created something too slow for battlefield reality. The lesson extends beyond World War II. The Navajo Code Talkers story is usually told as unbreakable code wins war. The real story is warriors with cultural knowledge, battlefield experience, and authority to make decisions adapted official systems to combat reality in ways military planners never anticipated. They didn't break rules for convenience. They modified protocols to save American lives while maintaining security. They trusted their own expertise over bureaucratic procedure. And they were right. The examination of those wire recordings at Quantico provided the final proof of something military organizations often forget. The people on the ground, facing actual combat conditions, sometimes understand operational reality better than planners in safe headquarters.
The code talkers were given a code and told it was perfect. They discovered it wasn't fast enough. They fixed it themselves, without permission, without fanfare, without recognition. They just did what needed to be done. The Japanese never broke the Navajo Code. They never even broke the official version that existed mostly in training manuals. They certainly never broke the battlefield adaptation because they never knew it existed. And in that single fact lies perhaps the most important lesson. The greatest security doesn't come from complicated protocols that look impressive on paper. It comes from cultural knowledge combined with battlefield judgment, from warriors who understand both their mission and their capabilities well enough to adapt official systems when reality demands it. The Navajo Code Talkers saved American lives not just by using an unbreakable code, but by making it faster when speed mattered most. They won not just with their language, but with their judgment. The Marine Corps gave them a code. They gave America victories. And the difference between those two things explains everything about why some militaries win wars while others lose them.